Hello Year 9 Science students. Today it's term 2 and this is lesson 2 for Year 9 Science. We'll be learning about the stimulus response model to maintain homeostasis. Welcome to this smart lesson about the stimulus response model. By the end of this lesson you should be able to explain what receptors do, state the function of the control centre, explain what effectors do, and describe the stimulus response model from start to finish. As you go through this PowerPoint, you will find that there will be questions, and it would be a good idea if you use the worksheet to answer those questions, and the answers will be on this PowerPoint. So hopefully this will work well. Thank you. What is a stimulus? A stimulus is any action that makes an organism to react, that is, cause. Just remember, stimulus is singular, stimuli is plural. So let's have an example. The stimulus response model starts with a stimulus. A stimulus is anything the body senses. For instance, if someone pokes you with a pencil, your body will sense the pressure the pencil exerts on your skin. Or, if you place your hand over a fire, you can feel the heat coming off of it. In these examples, the pressure from the pencil and the heat from the object are both stimuli. There are lots of different kinds of stimuli, more than one stimulus. However, the important ones for homeostasis are the ones that deal with changes in the body's internal environment. For instance, your body temperature could start to rise on a hot day. This rise in temperature is an important stimulus. This slide shows the adult body temperature. If it's too low, usually below 36 degrees Celsius, then that is a stimulus for your body. If it's too high, that is above 38 degrees Celsius, then that also is a stimulus for your body. So, stimuli can include internal stimulus and external stimulus. Internal stimuli are in an organism. They include germs, dehydration, lack of energy, pain and hunger, and other things. External stimuli are in the environment. For example, presence of water or food, predators, heat, rain, sharp points, and other things. Sense organ receptors actually respond to the stimulus. Stimuli are detected by receptors. Receptors are organs and cells that detect changes in your external and internal environment. Humans have 4 types of receptors, each of which detect different types of stimuli. This is a table showing the types of receptors, the stimulus, and the locations that you find them in the human body. So, number 1, photoreceptors. For example, light, which are located in the eyes. Mechanoreceptors is number 2. Mechanical forces, like pressure or vibrations, is the stimulus, and they're located in the ears and skin. Number 3, chemoreceptors are the concentration of chemicals, stimulus, and they're located in the tongue and nose. And number 4, thermoreceptors have the stimulus of temperature or heat and are located in the skin and muscles. When a receptor detects a stimulus, it sends a message to the control centre. The control centre then uses this information to decide what the body needs to do. In most cases, the control centre is the brain. However, it can sometimes be other organs, such as the thyroid, which is a gland in the throat, or the pancreas, which is an organ near the stomach. What organ acts as the control centre depends on what kind of stimulus the body has detected. So let's quickly review the first half of the stimulus response model. The body's internal environment changes. This change is called a stimulus. The stimulus is detected by a receptor. The receptor then sends information to the control centre, which decides what the body needs to do. So now we can answer some questions to check your understanding. Question 1. The body can detect changes to its external and internal environment. State what these changes are called. Is it A, B, C or D? The answer is A. Question 2. There are organs and cells in your body that detect changes in the environment. Recall what these are called. Is it A, B, C or D? The answer is D. Question 3. State which of the following is an example of a control centre. Is it A, B, C or D? The answer is A, the brain. Question 4. State whether the following statement is true or false. The control centre detects a change in the internal environment and then sends this information to the receptors. Is it true or false? The answer is false, because the receptors are the one that detect the changes and send the information to the control centre. In the first half of the stimulus response model, the body detects a change to its internal environment. Now we will learn how it responds to this change. As you already know, the control centre receives information from receptors about the body's internal environment. Using this information, it can determine what actions the body needs to take to maintain homeostasis, or a balance. So in the picture on the right-hand side, if you've got a set of scales, that could be your body. If a stimulus is imbalanced, a receptor senses it, sends a message to the control centre, which then sends a message to an effector, which brings the body back in balance. Once the control centre has decided what the appropriate course of action is, it sends a signal to the parts of the body that can carry out this action. These parts of the body are called effectors because they affect or cause the body's response. Effectors come in many shapes and sizes. Muscles are a classic effector, as in the picture to the right-hand side. They can move you to a safer environment, control your blood pressure by changing the size of your blood vessels, or warm you up by making you shiver. This is a diagram of your eye. You have glands throughout your body that produce important substances. Sweat, for instance, is produced by glands in your skin, while tears are made by glands next to your eyes. You can see the tear ducts in the picture and the tear gland above the eye. Sweat glands are important effectors. Eccrine glands are the most common and are found all over the surface of the body. They are most numerous on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. As you can see in the diagram, they're coloured blue. The apocrine glands, which are coloured with circles of grey, are common in the armpits and groin area. Sweat from the apocrine glands does not evaporate as quickly and can lead to foul body odour. Apocrine sweat is often a result of emotional stress or anxiety. The effector's job is to carry out the body's response. This response will act against whatever changes have occurred in the stable internal environment. This way, the internal environment is kept stable. For example, when your body temperature drops, your muscles shiver. This produces heat and warms you back up. In this case, the muscles are the effectors and the shivering is the response. Keep in mind that your body can use many different effectors and responses to deal with the same issue. For example, to stop your body temperature from dropping on a cold day, your muscles can shiver to produce heat. The blood vessels in your skin, hands and feet can also constrict, that is, they become skinnier. This keeps the majority of your blood near the centre of your body where the cold air cannot steal heat from it. So let's quickly recap the second half of the stimulus response model. The control centre decides what the body needs to do in order to maintain homeostasis. It then sends commands to one or more effectors. These effectors produce responses that act against changes in the internal environment, thereby keeping the internal environment stable or in homeostasis. So here's some questions to check your understanding. Question 1. State whether the following statement is true or false. Effectors receive information directly from receptors. Is that true or false? The answer is false, because receptors receive information directly from effectors. Question 2. State which of the following are examples of effectors. There is more than one right answer. Select all the correct options. And the answer is tear ducts and muscles. Question 3. State whether the following statement is true or false. When the body experiences a change in its internal environment, it can use many effectors at the same time to fix this change. The answer is true, as you saw with the slide on muscles. Question 4. Recall what decides what the body needs to do in order to maintain homeostasis. The answer is the control centre. The control centre is what decides what the body needs to do in order to maintain homeostasis. Let's put together everything we have learnt about the stimulus response model. You can see the 5-step model, and underneath it is an example. For example, if there's a bright light, which is a stimulus, the sensory cells in the eyes are the receptor that detects it. They send a message through the nerves to the brain, which sends a message to the muscle, which is an effector, and the response is the muscle contracts and the pupils of the eyes contract, so it does not hurt the eye. The stimulus response model. Step 1. First, receptors detect a change in the body's internal environment. This change is called a stimulus. Step 2. Then the receptors send a message to the control centre. The control centre processes the message and decides what the body needs to do in order to maintain homeostasis. The control centre is usually the brain, but it can be a different organ depending on what stimulus the body has detected. And step 3, the control centre sends commands out to the effectors, which carry out the appropriate responses. Let's look at a quick example of the stimulus response model. On a cold day, your body temperature starts to cool down. Thermoreceptors detect this stimulus and send a message to the part of the brain called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus processes the message and sends a command out to your muscles, telling them to shiver. The shivering process produces heat, which keeps you warm. It always amazes me that the human body is so clever at solving problems and maintaining homeostasis. Here are some questions to check your understanding. Question 1. State whether the following statement is true or false. When a receptor detects a change in the internal environment, it sends a signal to the control centre. The control centre then sends a signal back to the receptor, telling it how to counteract the change. The answer is false, Because the control centre sends a signal back to an effector. Question 2. State whether the following statement is true or false. In the stimulus response model, receptors determine what the body needs to do to maintain homeostasis. They then send this command to the control centre. The answer is false, because it's not the receptors that determine what the body needs to do, it's the control centre that determines what the body needs to do to maintain homeostasis. Question 3. Recall what controls and coordinates the body's response to a change in the internal environment. The answer is the control centre. Well done. Some more questions to check your understanding. In the stimulus response model, recall which part performs the body's response. It's either the receptor, effector, control centre, or stimulus. The answer is the effector. Now I'll explain this answer. The control centre determines what the body's response to a stimulus should be. It then sends this information out to effectors. These actually carry out the response. In the case of homeostasis, the response will counteract a change in the internal environment, thereby keeping the internal environment stable. Some more questions to check your understanding. Question 5. Recall which part of the body senses changes to the internal environment. Is it the control centre, stimulus, receptor, or effector? The answer is the receptor. To explain this answer, changes to the internal environment, called stimuli, are detected by special organs and cells called receptors. The receptor then sends this information to the control centre, where it can be processed. Here is another question to check your understanding. Question 6. This is a long answer, longer than what the other questions were, identifying parts of the stimulus response model. So, Barina drinks lots of water during the day. This causes the concentration of water in her blood to increase. This increase in concentration is detected by a chemoreceptor, which sends this information to a section of the brain called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus processes this information and then sends a command to the kidneys, telling them to get rid of excess water in the form of urine. What you need to do is identify the stimulus, receptor, control centre, effector, and response. Write your answer. I've started it off for you, and you can check your answer on the next slide. Question 6 answer. Stimulus. The stimulus is the increase in concentration of water in the blood. The receptor is a chemoreceptor. Control centre. The control centre is the hypothalamus, which is part of your brain. Effector. The effector is the kidneys. Response. The response is to get rid of excess water in the form of urine. Another question to check your understanding. Question 7. Explain how receptors and effectors are different. You need to write your answer, what receptors are, what the effectors are, and therefore how receptors and effectors are different. Check your answer on the next slide. So question 7, this is the model answer. The question was, explain how receptors and effectors are different. Receptors detect a change in the internal environment called stimuli. They then send this information to the control centre. The effectors receive commands from the control centre and then carry out the body's response. This response acts to counter the change to the internal environment. Therefore, receptors are the body's detection system, while effectors carry out the body's responses. Additionally, receptors send information to the control centre, while effectors receive information from it. The questions are getting harder to check for your understanding. Question 8. This is for the experts. Researching effectors. So, there are many kinds of effectors in the body, only a few of which were mentioned in this lesson. Do some research and identify 3 effectors. For each effector, write a few sentences explaining one way it helps maintain homeostasis. And write your answer. Remember, you need to research 3 effectors. You can check your answer on the next slide, which will give 3, but you may have different answers. So, question 8, this is the example model answer. 3 effectors and explaining one way each effector helps maintain a homeostasis. You could have used the sweat glands, which are located in the skin. Can be used to regulate body temperature. When the body's internal temperature starts to rise, sweat glands can produce sweat. As the sweat evaporates, it cools the body down. Another effector, the liver, controls many aspects of homeostasis, including the concentration of glucose in the blood. When the glucose concentration drops, the liver can release glucose into the blood, raising the concentration back up. It can do this because it has a large store of glucose, as well as other sugars and fats. And third effector, there are 3 types of muscle in the human body. You have skeletal, smooth and cardiac. There is smooth muscle on the inside of many of our blood vessels. It can control the diameter of the blood vessels by constricting or relaxing. By changing the diameter of the blood vessels, the smooth muscle can control the body's blood pressure. Here is another question to check for understanding. Question 9. This is also an extra for experts. Researching control centres. So, there are a few different control centres in the body, each of which deals with different parts of homeostasis. 2 classic control centres are the hypothalamus, which is in the brain, and the pancreas. Do some research on these 2 control centres. Explain where they are located in the body and what aspects of homeostasis they coordinate. Finally, suggest some stimuli they might deal with. Write at least 2 paragraphs in your response. Use the next slide for your response. This slide is to help you to answer your question 9. First of all, you're researching the hypothalamus, and secondly, you're researching the pancreas. You can check your answers on the next slide. Take your time, you don't have to be in a hurry. This is question 9 example model answer. Number 1, the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is a small region near the centre of the brain. It controls many aspects of homeostasis. This includes body temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, body weight, and the concentration of water in the blood. Some stimuli it might deal with include an increase or decrease in body temperature, blood pressure, or water concentrations. Number 2, the pancreas. The pancreas is an organ located under the stomach. Its main role in maintaining homeostasis is to control blood glucose levels. Glucose is a type of sugar. Blood glucose is the concentration of glucose in the blood. The main stimuli it would deal with are increases or decreases in blood glucose concentrations. In this lesson, you learned about the stimulus response model. This is how the body maintains homeostasis, or a balance. You should now be able to 1. explain what receptors do. 2. State the function of the control centre. 3. Explain what effectors do. And 4. Describe the stimulus response model from start to finish. Number 1. Explain what receptors do. You can pause this PowerPoint and try and come up with an answer, and then you can come back to it for the answer. Receptors detect changes in the external and internal environment. These changes are called stimuli. Receptors can send information about the stimuli they detect to the control centre. 2. State the function of the control centre. Once again, you can pause this and try and answer it. Here's the answer. The control centre controls and coordinates the body's response to a stimulus. Usually this is the brain, but sometimes it is a different organ. The control centre receives information from receptors, processes this information, and determines what the body needs to do. It then sends commands out to effectors, which carry out the appropriate actions. 3. Explain what effectors do. Once again, you can pause it, have time, take all the time you want. This is the answer. Effectors carry out whatever actions the body needs doing. For instance, when you touch a hot surface, muscles will remove your hand from the surface quickly so as to avoid a burn. This makes muscles effectors. Effectors receive their commands from the control centre. The actions they perform are called responses. Describe the stimulus response model from start to finish. Remember these 5 parts: stimulus, receptor, control centre, effector, and response. A change in the body's internal environment, called the stimulus, is detected by receptors. Receptors send a message to the control centre. The control centre processes this information and decides what the body should do. It then sends commands out to the correct effectors, which carry out the body's response. This response counteracts the change in the internal environment, thereby maintaining homeostasis. This is a balance in the body. The body is so amazing. This ends our lesson for today, and you will refer back to the stimulus response model in further lessons. So enjoy your day, and thank you for joining me in this PowerPoint. Bye.